became a major commuter route. So what they did is they put up, they had lights triggered to go to red.
All right. Well, call the meeting to order. Let me read our 91A notice here for maybe the last time. Per New Hampshire RSA 91A:2, 3B, I've declared the COVID-19 outbreak an emergency and waived the requirement that a quorum be physically present at the meeting pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order 2020-04, Section 8, as extended by Executive Order 2021-04 and Emergency Order 12, Section 3. Members will be participating remotely and will identify their location and any person present with them at that location. All votes will be by roll call vote. So I'll begin. Joy, do you want to start us off?
I'm Joy Noel, selectman from Newbury, and I am zooming from home.
Okay. Sean?
Sean Mulholland, city manager in Lebanon. I am in my office and I'm alone.
Terry?
Terry Murphy, selectman from Bridgewater.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Terry. Finish.
No, I'm zooming in from home.
Okay. Phil?
Bill Warren, town manager in Meredith, and I am in my office at the town hall.
Okay, and I'm Mark Dakota, town manager in Waterville Valley. I'm in my office with the crowd outside. I'm going to get up and shut the door. So I'm in my office alone. Yes. All right. So thank you very much for being here. We're going to first order of business is going to be the minutes review and approval. So Jim, you had forwarded the minutes to us. Has everybody had a chance to look at them?
Yes, they were extremely brief.
Yes, they were.
I move that we accept them as sent.
Okay.
Second.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right.
Mark?
All right. So,
Mark, can I make a brief comment?
yeah.
I would just note that, as much stylistically, I hate the initial elements. I'm accepting of that, but at least in the first mention of who's present, those should be full names.
Yeah.
3 years from now, no one's going to remember who PW is or
Right.
et cetera.
I even wrote them in on my printed copy, so
All
for
right.
fear I would
Jim,
forget at some point.
Yeah, so can we just make that note, Jim, and put under members present, if you write out the names and then put the initials in parentheses, and then you can use the initials for the rest of the minutes. Oh, I don't know if I see your name, Jim, but I do not. Oh, there you are. Okay. All right, good. Any other comments on the minutes? All right, hearing none, we'll go through the roll call. Joy, Sean,
Abstention.
oh, okay, Terry,
Here.
all right, and Phil,
Yes.
and I'll say yes. Okay, so next item on our agenda is future meeting logistics. We are at the end of this week, facing the end of the emergency orders, and it still appears that the governor is not going to renew them after Thursday. Is that correct, Jim?
That's understanding.
Anybody else have any understanding different than that? So we're going to make the assumption then that at least a quorum of the group has to be together. We can still run a blended meeting so that maybe we can rotate it around in locations so that folks, we can get 3 people together and then the others can just participate by Zoom. But any thoughts on that?
The only
Well,
thought
I
I had is we shouldn't require, obviously, the firm to be present. They should be able to participate remotely. That will reduce costs and make it more convenient for them.
Yep. Any thoughts? Do you want to do it in Concord as a central location? And then go there? How do you want to do it?
Mark, before you move on to that logistical point, I want a clarification either from Jim or Jane. I think not only do you have to have a quorum physically present in a location, but anyone participating remotely has to stay in, maybe it's an emergency, maybe it's not, but they have to have an articulable reason why they can't be present. And it can't be just because I don't want to. That's the gist of Senate Bill 95 is trying to eliminate that emergency provision, I think.
Okay. That's fine. So we will plan on everybody attending, but, you know, understand that we, at the minimum, are going to need a quorum.
And because Paul and I are not actually members of the board, I assume our participation remotely is acceptable.
Yeah. And I agree that, you know, as far as Bernstein is concerned, we'll definitely have them participating remotely as well. So that'll be easy for you guys to do remote participation.
So in
So,
terms of a meeting location, I don't think the building where Health Trust is open yet. I forget the date when it opens up, but we could make arrangements with them as soon as that happens, and that might be in the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure if it's July 1, but we can check with them to see if they're open, because that's one place we could meet in Concord.
at NHMA,
Yes.
yeah.
Do you want me to look into that, or?
Yeah, could you check with that, Sean? And I think you're correct. I was just down there to do some bond bank work, and I think Tammy St. Julius told me that it's July 1 that they'll be opening back up. And that they have a large enough room where we can also accommodate the entire group. So we could do all of our meetings there if they would allow us.
Yeah, that's the question, whether they're going to allow us, because we're not necessarily an affiliated group, so I'll have to ask.
Mark, I'll just offer this up. You know, I realize it's not as convenient as Concord, but if we have issues with securing a space in Concord, obviously we'd be happy to host here in Manchester at our office. We certainly have ample space and technological resources to facilitate a meeting or meetings. So.
Okay, that will be our backup plan then. So Sean will check, and we will email out once we select a date. We'll find out if NHMA is available, and then we'll go from there.
Just as a note that they've always allowed us in the past to use the facility down there.
Yeah, they have. I mean, all of the member towns of our group are members of the association, so hopefully they will continue to allow us to do that. Yeah. All right. Does that address all of the questions, Jim?
I think it does. We'll obviously continue to monitor anything at the state level that changes what we need to do. But yeah, I think securing a physical location will go a long way towards addressing our issues, and then obviously we'll just have to juggle schedules a little bit, but that's fine.
Okay. All right. If there are no other comments on that item, we'll move to number 4 on the agenda, the legislative Oh, go ahead, Sean.
Mark, just a question. So my concern is that we schedule that next meeting, because obviously we got transit time, and for most of us, that's going to be somewhat extensive. So the sooner we can get that scheduled, the sooner I can move things around and be able to facilitate that. I'm sure everybody else is probably in the same spot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll have a schedule. We'll have the scheduled next joint board meeting and the full committee meeting scheduled at the end of this, at this time. Okay, so before we leave today, we'll have that.
In that vein, Mark, you know, we've been somewhat fluid because we've been meeting virtually and it's easier to just congregate that way. If we're moving more to a traditional meeting, maybe we should consider or contemplate a standing meeting schedule, the third Monday of the month, or, you know, whatever everyone's schedule allows. I think that would help facilitate Sean trying to secure the space, let alone when, despite, or whether or not we're allowed to use it. But if we could have a standing meeting, then I think it's, everyone can predict travel times and other things. It's becoming much more important.
Okay, well, while we're on it, then why don't we just, everybody can look at their calendars, what works for folks the best? Second, third Mondays? Are those okay?
Okay, by me.
Depends on what time of day it is. Are we gonna go for 11 o'clock still?
For me personally, 11 o'clock would work because I can stop in here at the office and then get down to Concord by then.
Okay,
Does that provide enough time, Sean, for your schedule and your trip?
Well, my concern is Mondays are always a train wreck coming back to
Okay.
the office, and I just as soon avoid Mondays. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays are usually the better days for what I call away games.
Yep,
well, Tuesday is better for me than Monday. The reason I asked what time is I have meetings all over the place on Mondays.
okay, so Thursday work better for everyone's schedule? It does for mine personally.
Thursday, you're saying?
Yeah, Thursdays.
We can make it work?
I can make it work.
Thursday, yeah.
Okay, so we will schedule a, well, let's keep that in mind. Let's go through the rest of the schedule and see what the update or the agenda, and let's see what the legislative update and communications items are, and then we can decide if it'll be a full committee meeting or just another joint board meeting, and then we can decide how quickly we need to have that in July. All right, so how about a legislative update, Jim?
Sure, Mark, thank you, everybody. I'll turn over to Kathy in a second, but obviously last week was a fairly busy week as the House and the Senate wrap up their regularly scheduled business. The House had 2 days of session in which they disposed of a number of bills and passed a number of others on, and the Senate voted out its version of the state biennial budget, which sets up a committee of conference coming up here with the House. But Kathy is on and will provide a more detailed summary of where we are on a couple of issues of note for us. So Kath, you want to jump in?
Of course. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all. Be nice actually to see each other in person. That'll be great. Let me start with bills that we've been tracking before I touch base on the budget, if that's fine. Paul, I'm glad you brought up as far as with virtual meetings, et cetera. So Senate Bill 95 that we've been tracking, the House amended that. Pretty much they stripped the language and kept a commission to study remote meetings. However, it's not over. It's that time of year where the Senate looks at their bills and said, oh, you did what to our bills? Well, here's what we're going to do to your bill. So Senator Daniels, who's the prime sponsor of Senate Bill 95, took his language and tacked it on another bill, House Bill 108, which has to do with minutes in non-public sessions. It also has been amended to address attorney-client privilege under right to know. And now the language, Senator Daniels' bill is now in that bill. And I apologize, I just realized it did not add it to your chart, so I will add that. So basically, I suspect the Senate, when they meet on Thursday, both the House and Senate, communications will be sent to each body asking to concur. So we'll see. My guess the Senate may not concur in Senate Bill 95 and request a committee conference, or if they choose not to concur, it's dead. As House Bill 108 has been amended by the Senate, It goes back to House Judiciary, and the same question will be asked to concur. So we shall see. So there's a lot of, I think, balls in the air that we'll all be juggling to see what the other body does. It's that time of year. So that.
Excuse me, Kathy, could you go through that a little more slowly for what that process is? Just because I just like to understand what all that.
Absolutely.
What all that means. So the first question was, is there a joint session? Is that what you said on Thursday?
On Thursday, correct.
On the budget?
No.
Amendment?
Yes and no. But go ahead. You continue your questions. I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand what the committee, what the joint meeting is.
Okay, so both bodies will meet in session, and the communications will be to concur on bills that each body has amended. So let's take the budget. So that passed the Senate last Thursday, and the message or the communication to the House will be to concur. Based on history, most likely they'll non-concur and request a committee of conference. And we'll know on Thursday who the plays will be. You know, typically it'll be the leadership on both House and Senate Finance. And Jane, they have to finalize all that June 17th, sign off and bring it back to each body by June 24th, which is the last day of session. So even, I'm sure, what's interesting in this budget, and I was speaking to another client, it's less about the numbers and more about the policy. So the critical race theory, even though Senator Bradley has, shall say, watered it down, that may not set well with some of the members of the House, particularly the Freedom Caucus. They want their language of the divisive concepts. The other policy matter is the abortion. So we'll see maybe the debate being more on policy versus the dollars and cents. And that's just a guess there. So that will be one play that'll be moving forward with the budget and the committee conference. These bills, such as Senate Bill 95 or House Bill 108, again, I could see committees of conference where each side comes together, trying to hash it out. But it's still a critical time where, again, a vote in a committee of conference has to be unanimous. And each member, each conferee has to sign off. And, you know, you could have a rep or a senator say to you, yeah, we're good with that, I'm going to sign off, and then they don't sign off. So it's a funky time of year. Even though there's fewer bills to watch, the anxiety is a little elevated because there's just so much going on. And, you know, when a House votes out a bill, it becomes the House position, same with the Senate. It's almost like the movie, The Clash of the Titans. So, again, with the budget, you know, the financial picture is pretty good, especially when it comes to education and the American Rescue Plan dollars. So that will be good. But I think for the bills we're monitoring right now, we'll see how that goes. In particular, whether the, again, the Senate made amendments, Senator Daniels took his language, put into a House bill. And so we'll watch that. I know that's important there. Did I answer your question, Jane?
Yes, I just so I understand this Thursday is the both sessions.
Yep.
And there will be an attempt to concur on amended bills on both the House and the Senate. And again, could you repeat the amendments to the budget? Will that all, the Senate amendments to the budget, will that also be addressed by the House on Thursday?
Mm-hmm. Yep, so
Okay.
the communication what will happen, they'll meet and it's to take communications from each other. And it'll be announced that the Senate has asked to concur on House Bill 1 and 2. And what's happening probably even today, the behind the scenes, I'm sure House leadership is, you know, in communications with the House Finance Chair and Vice Chair. What do you want to do? So this is all kind of, let's just say there's a dress rehearsal going on right now. And when they meet on Thursday, then the public will know exactly what they're going to do.
So you're saying it's pretty fluid still?
It very much so, Joy, very much fluid, very much. And, you know, when they meet on the last day on June 24th, there'll be, I'm sure, you know, House members more so, they'll try and bring floor amendments to amend the budget and those attempts there. And Jim, if I'm correct, I think that's futile. I don't think that they can. They're not saying that they won't try, but I don't think amendments can be accepted at that point, if my memory serves me correctly.
I believe that's right. Yeah.
Okay. I always question the memory. Just, you know. So it's going to be interesting to say the least. So the budget is still fluid. Things can still change. And again, more so maybe in the policy matters that are in the budget. But we're going to keep an eye on the big picture for the coalition having to do what's been put into House Bill 2. But let me also, if I could, before we go into the budget, I want to bring your attention on your chart is Senate Bill 147. And it really was an omnibus piece of legislation regarding student aid, transportation of students, special education costs. The House amended it, added a new section called Special Education Risk Management Association. It allows school boards, pardon me while I just zoom down here. And they talk about risk pools and school boards, no less than 5 coming together to create a pool. I don't know if that's of interest or some type of importance. I just want to bring that to your attention.
Now, is that under the special education mitigation? That
And
pool?
yes, it follows that, Joy. It's a new section.
Okay.
It's a new section that the House Education added.
I can see that being very helpful for small school districts like ours,
Okay.
because special ed can, on a percentage basis, really mess with a budget.
Oh, we can
You have
blow it
one
up.
student- Yeah, you have one student come in
Right.
that has an IEP and they can wreck the entire special ed budget.
And while I kind of transition into the budget, particularly House Bill 2, there's been a provision adding, let's see, almost 67 million over the biennium to fully fund special education, which is also known as a catastrophic aid. So you have that as well. But I just wanted to bring that particular bill to your attention. Other bills that have been retained or by the House or referred back to committee by the Senate, those bills won't be taken up till sometime in the fall. So the House typically is well known for their work sessions on bill, not so much for the Senate, but each body has to report out a recommendation for January 2022. So, we're going to have that once we get beyond June 24th, there'll be a bit of a lull in the legislature, as you know, and then things will ramp up a bit come the fall.
Does that include the question that we had last time with I forget the amount of money that it was, but basically the hole that they had created by changing, what was the provision now? I forget what we were talking about, but I want to say it was in the $25 million range, that there was a missing amount that they had not identified where that funding was coming from, whether it was coming from the operating budget or whatever.
We were trying to decide if it was from the education fund.
Yeah,
Wasn't that what it was?
Right. Have they solved that issue yet, Kathy?
And that's not something different than what we're not referring to the SWEP reduction for 2023, or are we?
Yes, the SWEP reduction.
Oh, the 100 million.
Yes,
That's still in House Bill 2.
it is. Okay.
It is.
Have they solved the funding issue of that? Is it coming from the state education fund?
Yes, and let me I have that down here in my notes. And there was also a supplemental, so let me just double check. I have my House Bill 2 here. $57. I'm going to say yes, it falls under the category here in the budget, the education tax revenue.
Right, but could that potentially impact our member communities by forcing us to send an amount to Concord to cover that?
It could, But let me add, there's also following that section is a supplemental education payment. So what has been established, and part of my ignorance, I'm still trying to get how beneficial, if it is beneficial, this 100 million reduction in SWEP for 2023. In that sense there, I guess you get to keep it. However, another provision's been put in the budget that if a community now has a shortfall, the Department of Education is supposed to then say, write a check for the difference on that shortfall.
Right.
At the end of the day, and my question to you good people is, does this benefit? I just can't kind of get my head around it. I'm not as astute on the matter as you all are.
Well, under the current system where we still receive a warrant, right, for a statewide education property tax amount, but we're allowed to keep
Right.
whatever part of that we need to cover our total budget. And I think for the majority, probably all but a few communities, that means you keep everything because you also have an local education rate.
Correct.
And the tax rate.
Okay.
But if they have to make up this amount to give a reduction in the statewide property tax for education to other communities, are they going to make us send that excess SWEP back to Concord so that they can distribute it to reduce the payment in the receiver communities? Because it would have the same effect as going back to the receiver community situation, wouldn't it?
Right, and that's where I find it confusing as well, Mark. I think the whole intent was for the towns to keep it, again, that one time. And then my question, then what happens in the next biennium per se? And I think I'll have to follow up just to be clear. I don't want to misspeak on that. Again, this is still fluid, but that's what I was trying to get my, again, I understand it to a certain level, but at the end of the day, the question is, do you have to give anything back? Their intent in the conversations that I hear during the debate, especially on the Senate floor last Thursday, is that no, this will help the communities. Now, Senator Khan had put in a couple amendments that were defeated to prevent the SWEP, also to take out the education freedom accounts. But one side is saying, and that Senator Khan said it, you're not helping, the poorer communities, you're helping the wealthier communities such as Rye and Newcastle, Sunapee. You hear that same argument. The Republicans are saying, no, we're going to help them and help, reduce property taxes. I think we need to get more, clarity on how that, really works in that sense there.
Yeah, I think we've been asking about this repeatedly, and this is critical for our group to understand. And so we would expect that you would be able to provide us with detailed information on this as soon as possible. We've got budgets. I mean, we're at June 30 budget. We've asked this over the last several meetings. So we really need to understand what's the source that's going to fund the deficit, and whether we are going to have, or any of our organizations are going to have to contribute the excess SWEP, or is it simply going to fall on the responsibility of the local education tax to, make up any difference? And that's absolutely critical that we understand this.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it's a shell game. They just changed the name of where it's coming from. It's the same money that just comes out of us, no matter which way.
We're not sure though. I mean, this is what we need to be sure. If they're reducing SWEP by $100 million overall, then that would mean, I believe, that the SWEP rate would be lower. So it's
but isn't that only for 1 year?
It is.
So it's normally around $2. Presumably, it would be less than that, right? That the actual SWEP that everyone is going to have applied to the tax bill. So you're going to raise, less SWEP tax money. So the question is, for that gap, for the poorer towns, it sounds like they're saying, no, we won't allow you to have to fill that gap. There's going to be some funding source, to help. And so we just need real clear definition on what the funding sources is and what is funding that. And then the other question that we've asked is, what is the fiscal impact of this to the donor towns? Does that mean that our local, presumably, does that mean that first, does it involve excess SWIP at all? And secondly, thirdly, does it require donor towns, in order to fund their already budgeted school department budgets, to raise the local education tax when it comes time to set the tax rate? So again, this is the whole show, in my opinion,
Yep.
right now.
So we got two questions here, Paul and then Sean.
Yeah, I was just going to make an analogy, maybe to make it simple for everyone, and if you disagree, please speak up. The budget, as I understand it being proposed, has an adequacy amount that does say is $100 to each community, just to keep the numbers simple. If you're a poor or a receiver town, the tax rate set by this statewide property tax never meets that $100. So they've always been in a deficit situation. Donor towns, let's say, using that tax rate, raises $120 per town. We've used the $100 as expected because it's the adequacy amount. And then we use the 20 that we raise in excess of that to put towards our total operations, because adequacy is never the amount truly needed to educate your students. Through this bill, by deducting 100 million from the SWEP collections, let's say most towns or most donor towns would suddenly be at $80. And for the receiver towns, well, they're going to get that $20 extra. In all likelihood, the donor towns might get down to 100, might go down to 80. Maybe they'll have a $20 fix, but there's still $20 less being collected because the tax rate is no longer generating 120. So even if this is a reduction for donor towns in the statewide property tax, we're going to have to make up the 20 that we, in the excess, that we're going to have to pay for it. So that's going to increase the local tax. That's point one. So it's really just a shell game swap, one tax rate for the other tax rate. The second one is, as I said, the receiver towns that maybe now generate 80 or less are going to have to be given more to be whole to the $100. Budget estimates say that's a $100 million gap. They're going to, as I understood it, use a surplus amount in the education trust fund for a portion of it, and then the remainder was going to come from operations, whatever that meant. If they can't find it from operations, let's say they can only find 90 million of the gap, then that 10 million needs to come from somewhere. And the quick and easy way to get to it, we're fearful as donor towns, is, you not only will not be able to use any of the excess SWEP, but you have to send it in to cover this deficit that's going to create. So that's the 2-bit problem foreseeable for donor towns, in that they're losing the excess SWEP that they always used, and you're going to have to make up for it in the local tax rate, and there be a unfunded liability created by the amendment, and other sources need to be found. And the quick and easy one is, let's send the excess. Maybe donor towns, because of this deduction, their amount raised is $110 and not 120. They still want the 10 to fund the gap. So that, in essence, as I saw the concerns from this group relative to HB 1 and 2.
Well, isn't our concern that when it says other sources, that's us always?
Well, no, they said operating accounts, which at least led me to believe that it was going to be out of the state operating budget, not specifically the SWEP, but who knows? It was not specified. So, Sean, you have a comment.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but the original statutory bills that were put in there, the bills that were originally proposed, they had enabling legislation that would allow that transfer. To my knowledge, there is no legislation that is still on the table that would allow the transfer of SWEP back to DRA. Now, of course, in a compromise situation here, which they're going to be in, they could obviously do that without any public hearings or anything else. So that'd be the only circumstance, I believe, unless there's something that I don't know about in HB 1 or 2 that I have not seen, or there's some language some mechanism that would allow that to occur. That doesn't exist right now. So the only way that can happen, again, correct me if I'm wrong, is somebody would have to develop some language that they would put in a compromise solution, which the Republicans have been pretty hard about saying they are not going to support going back to donor towns. Chuck Morse in particular, who's obviously going to be leading this process in the Senate. I know Gary Daniels is actually the chair of finance, but the reality is Chuck Morse is going to be the one who's going to be leading that with Jed Bradley, any compromise solution. So we just need to verify that there is no language that's put in there. Again, I haven't found any, but confirming that would be very helpful. And then the second part, should that occur, what's our next step? The only next step we're going to have after that, of course, would be to speak to the governor about it or file some sort of injunctive type of writ in the courts, which would take some time to prepare, which we are not in that position right now. So in other words, if that worst case scenario were to occur, we're not going to be in a position to do anything about it for quite some time unless we start that process now.
Yeah, I think that the best case scenario we can hope for is basically whatever they reduce the SWEP number by, we're, as donor communities, we're going to be increasing our local amount to make up for what the less money that the SWEP raises. So if it goes from 214 to 2, that additional 14 cents goes on our local education side of the rate. Receiver communities, I think, could see an actual reduction in their tax rate. I think worst case, Sean, you're absolutely right, is they amend the budget language to actually make us send SWEP in. So what do we do if that happens? Or should we start crafting a decision for the entire group to consider, just to be ready for that if it happens?
The question is, I guess, for Jim Merrill and companies, how long will it take to get ramped up for litigation? And I presume it's going to take some time to put that package together.
Yeah, it will take a little bit of time, but it can be done on an expedited basis. We felt we needed to do it. I think, so the answer is it'll take some time, but it's not going to, you're not looking at months. But let's step back from that for a second. I guess first, as Kathy points out, it is a fluid situation. The budget conferees have not been set yet. We still have every opportunity, if there are issues that arise out of this, for us to engage and work this process if that issue emerges. As you're pointing out, Sean, very correctly, the Republican leadership in the legislature, particularly Chuck and Jeb, have made it very clear they're not going to go back to the old system. And they're going to be loath to be seen as raising taxes. That's true philosophically, and that's true in their words and their deeds over these last few months. So if there's an issue here where maybe if the issue is something they've overlooked that may inadvertently cause an issue, but I think that's something we can correct in the short term with them. I think that's the first thing is, as we look at the end of this week, and we know what budget conferees are, and we can already sit here and determine who they're going to be. we can have those conversations over the next several days to help pin down some of these outstanding issues. And then on a parallel track, you know, without going too far afield, at least have the conversation internally, you know, if we had to resort to litigation, what's that process look like from a timeline standpoint and everything else, so you have all the facts in front of you to assess, so we're not wasting time.
Jim, can you also address, we haven't talked about, well, we've talked about a possible systemic budgetary shortfalls just from the $100 million cut in the SWAP. But what I think is still in the budget here and there are these education freedom accounts or you know, the private school funding or tuition funding. Those are coming out of the Education Trust Fund, thereby exacerbating the $100 million deficit. And I think you're correct, Sean. It would be antithetical for the senators that you've mentioned to take a position to accept a donor receiver town system back. But when you take out the totality, I think as Kathy said, the policy positions of many Republicans, particularly on these tuition credit situation, there might be budget constraints that just, there's no other answer. And they'll have to hold their nose and pick something. And we just want to make sure abundantly clear that it's not the donor receiver at all costs, because otherwise our only other recourse short of litigation is to advocate the defeat of the state budget and create a budget crisis at the end of the fiscal year. So none of that is particularly palatable.
The one thing they could potentially hide behind, if I'm right, is this wouldn't take effect until the second year of the biennium, right? So they could say that they're going to pass language that, you know, may have us returning excess SWEP, but that it's not going to go into effect for this tax rate, and they're going to see how the revenues pan out, and that would be a last resort in 22, calendar year 22, right? Which is,
Can they do that, right? Contingency funding?
I don't know.
Well, weren't a few of those swept bills, that the excess swept bills, retained? And typically it's a nice way to say they're dead. But sometimes, you know, if they may actually be retained by the committee and worked on after this budget's passed. So that might be a vehicle by which it could be introduced. So that's another critical piece that you know, we need to watch and figure out during these very interesting times.
Yeah, and certainly we have those retained bills on our radar. And
Yeah.
Point, Mark and Joy, I think it would not be the first time that a legislature in the first year did something, and then with additional facts and that come in the ensuing months, decide they've got to make a fix and do something to address the second year of the budget. So again, we're not there at this point, but that is something that, again, and I go back to the fact that the Republicans in the leadership, you know, are very strong fiscal conservatives, have said time and time again, they're not going to go back to this system. If something that they're doing begins to drag them towards that type of system, they'll have time to fix it and we'll have time to message them on it. But in the short term, to go back to my original point, I think trying to cut through with some of them on this issue in the next few days as they get ready to the conference, we can certainly do and make sure we have a seat at the table as they begin these conversations.
And lastly, just to add, not lastly, but keep in mind, in conjunction with that, they provided a supplemental education payment. And basically that if there's any shortfall, a decrease due to this reduction of SWEP, then the communities are to be made whole. Now, again, that's still fluid based on revenues. And again, that's not effective until the 2023. So But I think to your question, Jane, is that we can at least nail that down. Well, nail it down as best we can, knowing, again, things are so fluid, even with future revenues, et cetera. So I'm clear on that.
The proverbial nailing Jello to the wall.
Yeah,
What was that?
Absolutely.
is the.
Jello to the
conversation
wall,
that-
nailing it.
Yes.
Well, but listen,
Yeah.
and I've heard people say this before, they say, well, geez, Republicans control everything. You've got the governor's office, the House, and the Senate. Why can't they all just agree? And, from experience, it's often harder to come to that compromise. The House, there are some very challenging dynamics in the House right now that are driving this budget. You've got some very strong and experienced hands in the Senate that are driving towards where the governor wants to be. So, it does make it, I think, uniquely dynamic in this particular session because revenues are good. And so people are trying to do a number of different things while they navigate some of these other issues.
So
And
the
also-
the conversation that we have to follow closely is the one that starts on, is it Thursday?
Mhm.
Then okay.
Exactly. And on a side note, I don't know if it helps or hinders, but there's also language in House Bill 2 having to do with the American Rescue Plan, that if municipalities receive these dollars, they can keep it as maybe accepted as unanticipated revenue. So again, with revenues in New Hampshire from the taxes, and again, dollars coming into the state from the American Rescue Plan, going to municipalities, I don't know if it is a nexus to help as far as with the school districts. So interesting, a lot of money flowing around. I think at the end of the day, has to settle to assist. I think that's what we're keeping an eye on there.
Kathy, just to correct you, there are very few school districts that are dependent school districts. So money flowing to the municipalities do not flow to the school districts.
Okay.
They would have to have their own separate pot
Gotcha.
for the
Okay.
rescue plan.
So there's really no nexus, Paul, per se. Okay.
Only those communities
Portsmouth's
that have
dependent.
dependent school districts, and I think there's only a handful of them. like
Okay, thank you
Portsmouth.
for that clarity.
Yeah.
Okay, because you hear this chatter, again, all this money coming in, but does, at the end of the day, does it really benefit? And that's always, on anything is my question. So thank you. for the
And
clarity.
you're not alone. Many legislators make that error frequently. Don't feel bad
Thank
about
you.
it.
The school district right now are awash in money. For the most part, these are the money that's coming out of the federal government. They're having a hard time to figure out how to spend it. Yes, they really have a ton of money, which takes their eyes a little bit off the ball relative to asking for more at this point and screaming about the taxes and so on to a minor degree, but there's certainly a lot of money going into the school districts.
Well, it's hard for people to feel like they want to send more money there when they're sloshing in dollars right now.
That's right.
Well, and a lot of the schools are seeing increased budgets because of changing populations as well. So that's another factor. And whether or not those populations are going to be stable going forward.
Yeah.
Because we have had this spike through the pandemic, and what is that going to do to funding a couple of years down the line?
Mhm.
So, okay, a very complicated thing. I guess we start watching it on Thursday then, right? Anything else legislatively that we need to be updated on, Kathy or Jim?
That concludes on my part. Again, more will be happening on Thursday, and I'm sure right now behind the scenes, committees of conferences are talking, and we'll keep you posted there. But that's all I have for the moment.
Okay. We'll move on to coalition communities if everyone's okay with that. Jim, you want to update us?
Sure, thanks, Mark. Some of this, depends on what's happening in the legislature. So as you know, we sent our letter out to all the legislators 2 weeks ago, and the governor, and Commissioner Edelblue, and outlined our positions, as you know, and approved. And a number of, responses to that, acknowledgements and thanks, and including from Senate leadership, who was glad to see us weigh in. So, as we kind of, and this flows into the conversation with the legislation, but depending on what our, intelligence this week picks up as we're looking at the budget, I've thought next about taking that letter and crafting it into an op-ed, which we publish in the Union Leader. I want to wait a little bit on that, just to see if there are any additional elements we want to add in there relating to the budget negotiations and what we may. But that'll be, I think, in my opinion, the next kind of public-facing communication that goes out. The raw material is there. It won't take much to recraft it, but I do want to at least leave open the option of maybe adding some, budget negotiation specific items in there if we feel necessary. I also, I think, pressing item for us to hopefully resolve today. I've gone back to the vendor to talk about adding in kind of a social media component, primarily Facebook, that would take. And it sent me back a revised number. It was a little more added in. Some of that is, cost associated with it, but he feels he can do efficiency with updating the website and Facebook at the same time. So I think one-time fee is a few $100s more, and then I believe the monthly fee would be another $150 per month. And so I shared that with you, and I think with that, if we choose to move forward, we can get the website built out, we can get a Facebook page built out, and we can begin populating that with some of the material we've done. I shared with Jane the other day all of the recordings of our various webinars to date. We've got a letter out there, an op-ed soon. We can begin doing some stakeholder outreach with the Facebook page. But in any event, that's where we are on that front, and he's prepared to move forward whenever we give him the green light.
Okay, board thoughts. Jane, did you want to look like you were going to say something? No?
Oh, yes, about the recordings that were sent. We're having a little trouble posting them to our website. I have to work with our IT folks, and I have all of those been sent to all of the joint board members as well?
Not yet. I'm happy to do it after this call, though.
Okay, so just words of the wise, we're trying to get those up and posted.
Oh, excuse me, the dog's barking to come in now. I'll be back again in a second.
Okay. So we have not taken a entire board vote on adding the social media part, correct? In my notes, I don't have us having taken that vote. So do we need to put that on the agenda to do that, or do we want to do that as a joint board?
If we're gonna go outside of our budget, we're gonna have to get approval to go outside of the appropriations that are authorized.
Okay, but do we want to recommend that?
It was part of the budget.
But are we gonna stay within budget, though? We're gonna have enough money to be able to meet budget. That's what I'm getting at the end of the day. We are.
I believe so. I didn't see any of the numbers that were drastically different from the last time. The last time we were within budget.
Yeah, I don't think that a couple of $100 for the setup or $150 per month would change us outside of our approved budget.
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
All right. All right. Any other discussion? Joy?
Yes, I'll pass on that.
Okay. Sean?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
And I will vote yes as well. So we will go ahead with the social media portion, Jim.
Did the bills ever go out to the different towns?
Well, yes, that's actually the next item here. I know Sean's bumping up against having to leave if he didn't already have to. So I have reached out to the finance office in Portsmouth. I have not received anything back that the bills have gone out. So I will call her. Have you sent bills in, Jim, to be paid? Have they been paid?
I'm sorry, say that again, Mark, I couldn't hear you.
Have you sent invoices to the city of Portsmouth? Have you been paid yet?
Yes, we have sent invoices, I think, over the last few months, yes,
And have they been paid?
not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay.
And Jim, I think, did I get back to you? I think were they emailed originally and then sent regularly?
No, we just emailed them. I think we emailed them to your controller. I think.
Right. My recollection is that I thought that the request by email, they would request a hard copy.
I can check. I don't recall that, but if a hard copy is needed, I can certainly arrange.
Yeah, just resend those, okay? And that will also, and I'll circle back. We are in the middle of our budget hearing is perhaps today. And so, well, you know, I will definitely circle back with
Fine.
our finance director to confirm what the status is.
Whatever's easiest, I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Jane, just let me know after you've talked to Judy, please.
Will do.
Whatever date we set, I'd really like to update the entire group on the budget status, expenditures and revenues. And where we
Yes.
are. All right. So can we also let the record reflect that Sean had to drop off for another meeting, please? Just make sure that's in the minutes. So that takes care of number 6 on our agenda for the budget review. Number 7, other business. Anybody have any other questions or comments that we need to review?
Mark, not really new, but going back to the budget discussion, I just pulled up the budget that we had. I slightly misspoke. The budget for the third-party contractor was a $5,000 initial one-time expense and then a monthly expense of $500. So the monthly expense quoted is $65 a month over, but the one-time expense is nearly half of the 5,000, and we're starting in June rather than April. So under that parameter, I believe we'll be under budget, but not quite as budgeted.
Okay. Well, we'll change in the minutes. It should just reflect that it's as a bottom line, we are
Correct. Correct.
we're not bumping up against the maximum, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Mark, just so I'm clear as we get ready to adjourn here. So can I tell the vendor to begin the build out of the website and the Facebook page at this point?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I just wanted to be clear. Thank you.
Okay. Any other business?
Would you send us an email as soon as those things are, the social media is operational?
Yes, in fact, what I would typically do, and I'll do here, is I'd like you all to see what we would call kind of beta test versions first, before it goes up, just to make sure everyone's comfortable with the layout and the look and everything. So you'll get essentially a draft before it goes live.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we'll see it during work in progress.
Correct, that's right.
Okay.
Okay. So let's look at the July calendar for our next meeting. So the 24th is the final date, right? Kathy, you said that was when everything has to be resolved.
Correct. For the committees of conference reports, correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are there votes after that potentially, or all of the votes are taken?
All the votes will be taken, the legislative business will be done, but keep in mind, the next step following that would be what the governor does with these bills. Will he,
Okay.
veto, will he not? If hypothetically, let's hypothetically, and I don't see that today, he vetoes the budget, then the House and Senate will come back in session sometime either before or after Labor Day. So just keep that in mind. It isn't exactly over just yet, but if he doesn't, we'll know soon, not probably too long after, once the budget is adopted by both bodies, what the governor does, that should, come, I would say, pretty quickly,
Okay.
hopefully.
Kathy
So-
or Jim, have you heard about continuing resolutions if that timetable is adhered to? Because obviously July 1 is the new budget fiscal year. And if you don't have an approved budget and it's in limbo because it's vetoed or still in process, or, I mean, there's gonna have to be, otherwise state government shuts down. So.
Well, I mean, certainly there is precedent for operating under a continuing resolution. That happened, I believe, when when Governor Hassan was in office, there was a series of CRs that allowed the business to function while they navigated and negotiated a budget. So if again, I've not heard that talk. I don't think, Kathy, you have. I mean, I think at this point, people still feel like, there's a deal to be had on the budget. But that is a tool they can use if they need to.
I agree.
Okay. So is it the second or third Thursday of July? Is it
I have a
designated?
standing meeting on the third Thursday of every month. So the third Thursday is out for me.
Okay. Second Thursday, that would be July 8th. Is that okay? Because we'll have information for everyone at that point, kind of know where we stand. And we'll be able to brief everybody at that point. That should be a total committee meeting.
Okay. So we're talking 11 a.m. on Thursday, the 8th of July.
Yes,
I'm unavailable for that day.
As am I.
you are, Phil. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm off that week. So.
I'm wondering too, Jim or Kathy, regardless whether the 8th is appropriate or not, that time frame is more for an informational
Mhm.
update. Will you, between now and then, that time frame, need more or additional input based on the externalities and the unknowns in the process right at the moment? Because again, if we want to lobby the governor to veto the budget because it includes a SWEP return, that's a strategic decision. If something else happens that we can't even foresee and we all go, no, we're going to have to react to that. So is there something, at least on the joint board level, perhaps there needs to be something intervening?
My sense, Paul, is we should, at this time of year, we've got to keep the lines of communication wide open. I think we need to, if there's something that, there may be decisions that we can do, short of calling a meeting here, but I think we have a pretty clear direction of what we need to do. But obviously, if something comes up and we feel we need to convene a meeting on the quick, then we're certainly ready to do that if need be. So I think we should at least have that as a possibility depending on what happens here. I wouldn't expect us to go until July 8th without having a substantive conversation, put it that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Even by email, just to inform you of what's happening.
Okay. So for the, not a joint board meeting, because those will be pretty much on call, right? Depending on what happens on the 24th, we may need to have a joint board meeting to react. But do we want to go with the 8th or the 15th or the 22nd for our entire group to meet?
Well, I think if you have if we know something that's gone haywire on the 24th, I think delaying it to the end of July would be a mistake. You need to react fairly quickly to whatever, whatever people on the finance committee you may get to, and also the governor on the governor's council relative to the matter. So waiting, I think, is a mistake.
Okay, so we can tentatively schedule a July 8 meeting.
Yeah,
Is that soon enough?
and that would be in person, right?
And that will be in person in Concord,
Assuming
For
we
the
get
entire
the
group.
place, assuming that we get the,
assuming we can get the,
all right.
otherwise Manchester.
I thought Phil and Joy had a conflict on the 8th.
No, not.
No,
the
15th.
Just
Oh,
me.
15th. Oh,
I think Jane does too.
Oh, Jane does.
oh, okay. The first?
We can do the first. I can do the first.
I
Unless it-
cannot do the first in person, but I can participate remotely.
I know it's close to the 4th, so it's can mess up.
I would tend not to, I would say July 1st would not be a good day. Just because it's close to the holiday.
Right.
Jane, you can't do remote. Can you do remotely?
Well, I might be able to do that, just remote in for that. I'm going to also be away, but I can, hopefully, my Wi-Fi will work and
Yeah.
I'd be able to, it's always a challenge, but yeah, that's a possibility. I don't know about Phil's more important than,
Yeah, I won't be able to.
On the 8th?
No, correct. Yes, on the 8th. Yeah.
Okay. Well, somebody's going to be missing, so which day from a reaction standpoint, Jim and Kathy, do you think is best? Because we're gonna have at least one board member that won't be available, now through basically sounds like the 22nd of July. I would like to try to establish this as a standing meeting every other month. Just so people can put it on their calendars.
Okay.
So is it better to do the second or the third Thursday of the month? Jim?
I don't have a preference either way. I don't the third Thursday in July, I happen to have a conflict, but either day would work for me generally. I think as we think about when to meet, next, I certainly prefer closer, so we
Okay.
can convene and discuss what's happened and essentially what we need to do. But I don't have a strong preference of the second or third Thursday. Kath, do you?
No, I don't. And I think, am I correct that if something critical, really something went off the rails, we needed to convene, we could do so prior to that?
The joint board can, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. So
would
either or,
have to-
it doesn't matter. Well, but that's fine.
yeah, we'll just have to stay flexible and
Mhm.
go from there. So let's say the 8th at 11 at NHMA. And we can adjust if need be. But that'll be our tentative complete board meeting for all members. Do we need a joint meeting on the 28th to catch up? I will be gone, so someone else would have to chair that. Do we want to just see, Jim, what happens on the 24th and keep that as on call?
So
For the joint board.
just to be clear then, Mark, so you're talking about a potentially a joint board meeting on June 28th and then a full board meeting on July 8th?
Yes, a full board meeting on the 8th for sure, and then basically an on-call meeting for the joint board if we needed to, if there was an emergency decision, that something that came out on the 24th that we wanted to react to immediately.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
that works for me.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, so we will do it that way. I will send an email to Sean immediately following this, asking him to check on the availability of the NHMA meeting spaces for the 8th at 11, okay? And let's see where this goes. Thank you all for your time. We're at about an hour and 15 minutes, so I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, thank you very much, Joy. So I'm gonna take that as it passes. Thank you very much. And
Have a
we'll
good day,
talk to you
everyone.
soon.
All right.
Take care.
Take
Stay
care.
cool, everybody.
Bye.